All right, so as Stacey mentioned, Eamon Nathan, he uri tēnei no tō o Waipaua, pānga no ku kia Ngāti Torehina. And I've got that strong Greek bloodlines running through me too, from which I inherited these beautiful lush eyebrows from my grandmother. He pānga no ke kiro tō rarotonga, ngā te aira, te eira. No re mihana kia puto. Really nice to be here actually. I'm going to talk a little bit about reconnecting Northland and a little bit about a kaupapa that we're about to initiate, that we're sort of building for a wee while, entitled Te Kete Hononga. But I wanted to start with a bit of a story actually. And Daniel might recall some of this, or he was kind of involved on the periphery at the time. I was involved with a kaupapa called Te Rau Titapu up in Waipaua with my people. The kaupapa itself was about wānanga, and more particularly determining what the most appropriate processes of wānanga for our people of Waipaua are. And we kind of explored a lot of things, but one of the things that we landed on was that starting point of our wānanga need to be born from our unique markers of identity. Our tohu whaimana, our kōrero whaimana, our mahi whaimana, e rā o ngā ahuatanga, o tō mātou. And one of the tohu mana, obviously, in Waipaua, is Kauri. So we were, I suppose, fortunate enough to fit.
Arrows?
Arrows. Yeah. Sorry, I was using the arrows on the keyboard. So one of the wānanga that we had was to explore our relationship with Kauri. Explore our relationship with Kauri, te wao, te ngāhere, as Tui talked about, and what we might learn from our relationship with Kauri, about Kauri, and more particularly about ourselves. So we were fortunate enough, around about 2012, to receive a gift from the Ngāhere. And that was a large, significant kauri that washed down the river, and our cousins have forestry business, and we're able to pull the log off the beach and place it at our marae. We deliberated for about 4 years as to what we were going to do with this log. And eventually, as part of Te Rau Titapu, we managed to convince those that we needed to convince that we should carve a waka. Aside from the practical reasons of having a waka for our people, the exercise of the wānanga was more particularly about, as I said earlier, our relationship to Kauri and how we might explore our relationship to Kauri through the creation of a waka. We were intentional about that, and so what we did to ensure that we learned as much as we could from this exercise was to be deliberate and looking for the symbols or signs and opportunities of learning from this exercise, and to capture those things that we observations, if you like, that we experienced, and to do so through whakatauki. So if you can imagine that waka lying upside down, and at the time that we shaped the hull, it was time to sort of turn it over and then start hollowing out the inside. But before we did so, we had to oil the hull before we tipped it over. And so we invited the young wahine that were a part of the wānanga to do that mahi. And we equipped them with the tongue oil, and we gave them the cloths and all of that sort of stuff. But the thing that happened at that point in the wānanga was pretty much captured everything that we were looking for, or the intention. And that was, as soon as the oil hit the timber, I'm sure most of you will know what the sheen of kauri looks like with all the gum and the timber. It just came to life. And the instantaneous response of the wahine that were doing the oiling was spontaneous, and one of joy and glee and absolute kind of excitement. They just started getting all giddy and went, yeah, wow, beautiful, honestly. And we were all sort of standing back going, wow, this is primo. How do we capture this? And so we composed a little whakatauki. purotu kauri, purotu tangata. Beauty of the kauri is reflected in the beauty of the people, or thereabouts, something to that effect. There were other whakatauki that we, composed or created as well in response to, our experience. But that's the one I just thought I'd share because I'm mindful of time. I'm not keeping time, but I'm mindful I'll run out if I keep rambling. The other thing was what this whole experience did for our community. It united the valley. Waipoua is not a hugely populous area, probably about 30 peeps that live in the valley. But what it did, everyone came together. Everyone contributed to this initiative, this whole wānanga, in whatever way that they could. And it really, I suppose, indicated the power of, one, a kaupapa, and two, our desire to be a part of and relate to kauri in a practical way, for whatever reasons others had. But the Māori in the valley and amongst the people was truly palpable, truly palpable. So, to capture that notion, we named the waka Te Hiringa o Te Tangata, the vitality of the people, because that's what this whole wānanga created for our people. So, when Kauri dieback was discovered, I suppose, or confirmed in the Waipoua, conversations with our kaumātua, I suppose, attributed to Māori, the decline in the Māori. And what I suppose we've experienced in Waipoua as a consequence of some of the conservation practices that, such as sanctuaries and other practices that kind of are based on the premise of set aside and don't touch, is that whole way of thinking actually has a significant impact on the way in which we relate and are in relation to our kin, to te ngahere, to te waonui, to te taia. And in so doing, it inhibits the natural flow of Māori through realms and that regenerative nature of nature. And what we experienced was that when we relate and when we bring down those barriers, Māori is more free to flow and more palpable. And we experienced that definitely, that brought it into sharp focus through our wānanga. The effect of that kind of approach affects the resilience of the taio and by proxy, us as people. So Reconnecting Northland, this is the organisation I work for, we have a vision that in 3 generations, Te Tai Tokerau is a flourishing tapestry of resilient ecosystems, natural ecosystems. Our purpose is really around connections. We're a connectivity catalyst. We flow in between in the invisible work and making the connections the homies, as Stacey mentioned. And we've got four main strategy or strategic themes. One, as I mentioned, is as a connectivity catalyst, acting as that go-between to catalyse the right connections to achieve the outcomes that, not that we necessarily seek, but what the people in Te Tai Tokerau seek. Tapere, that's an old term drawing on my rarotonga whakapapa, for a district. So this is where all the good stuff happens. This is where groups are already doing mahi or want to do mahi in a particular locality, and our role as a catalyst is to help them connect up to achieve more connected, resilient ecosystems. Te Kete Hononga, I'll talk about shortly. That's about the streamlining of the services to support these groups to be able to do what they need to do more effectively, more efficiently. And nature-based enterprise is really about, well, the majority of the conservation field, ecological action field is reliant on grants, short-term grants, competitive grant funding. How can we create more regenerative revenue streams to support this mahi? So koina ngā rautaki e whai. One of the things, I suppose the outcomes on there's 4 there, but one of our medium-term outcomes is really about Māori enhancing practices. So that goes back to my kōrero about our experience with Te Hiringa. So Te Kete Hononga is a new initiative that we've been growing for a while, but it's really about recognising that there are a whole bunch of groups doing some primo work, hapu, community groups, iwi, who don't always have the access to the support services, the resources that they need to be able to do what it is that they want to do. And it's broad ranging, it's not necessarily the technical science stuff. Sometimes it's the HR, sometimes it's the project management, whatever it might be, there's a whole raft of it. So Tekete Hononga is about recognising that most of these services already exist. They exist in pockets within agency X and organisation B and so on and so forth, but they're not always that accessible. Tekete Hononga curates those services through relationship with those organisations and brings it into a centralised place, and the access to it is facilitated through our kairaranga, who are the people in the community who we're working with, who have the relationships with the groups on the ground, and in the understanding of what those groups need, we support them with the access to the services that they need to be able to better distribute it out to where it's needed. So, if you can imagine that image that you can see there is a bird's eye view of Tekete Hononga. You're looking into it from the top. You've got funding tools, training services, so on and so forth. They all sit within, and the niho taniwha, the triangular type shapes, indicates both outward and inward flow. So, like ngā kete o te wānanga, tāwhaki ascends to te rangi tuamahuru, he acquires ngā kete o te wānanga, brings it back to us mortals to help us navigate the world of perception and the world beyond self or beyond perception. But though that knowledge is not static, it's creative and replenished through creativity, so naturally self-nourishing. So too is Tekete Hononga, because a lot of this and some of this capability already exists within the communities. So how do we, as we grow the capability of the communities, they're feeding back in and they're sharing that knowledge with others and those services and supports with others, whatever that might look like. Ka pai. So these are just some kind of examples, like user cases. Ecological contractor, team expands, got a big drop of money, needs to expand their team, but they need a bit of support around HR and how they can sort of successfully on board. So they go to Kete Hononga, we facilitate access to the things that they need, and the outcome is, more effective onboarding. A landholder might be running dry stock. Got a whole bunch of sort of highly erodible land that they might want to retire. Through our connects with various organisations, we can help them develop planting plans and connect them with, for the areas that need to be planted out, so they can create, permanent forest for carbon farming and reduce sedimentation and runoff into the awa. Just some examples. At the moment, we're working with, so the trial we're going to be testing, we're kicking off in June. There are about half a dozen different groups, quite a good sort of cross-section of different groups. None, however, apart from Puketi Forest Trust, that are working with Kauri. They do have a positive site in the Puketi, but the mahi that we're predominantly supporting is around pest control, and they're the mahi that are undertaken as part of the Jobs and Nature kaupapa. So, in terms of expected outcomes, these are broad, I'm not going to read them out, but one is about streamlining service access for the groups, to grow capability, demonstrate that we can shift the system, because the system isn't working as efficiently, as effectively as it could be, facilitate greater cross-collaboration between not just agencies, but other community groups. Often, we've been into communities where there'll be like 20 or so initiatives up the valley, and Initiative A doesn't know what Initiative B's up to. That's just the nature. We kind of live in these individual fragmented kind of silos, and what we're trying to do through the mahi that we do is facilitate more cohesion and at scale. A more sustainable model, there's a lot of inefficiencies and poor return on investment from agencies and investors, private sector as well. And we want this, the reason we want to trial this is we want to ensure that it's replicable, we want to ensure that it's scalable so that it can be expanded across all of Te Taitokero and Aotearoa Te Waipounamu, and replicated in other areas, not just domestically but internationally as well. How am I doing for time, Dan?
You've got green.
Wow, green. Go away. Well, this is my last slide. You guys are listening so intently. Ngā koutou. Yeah, ngā koutou. This is a little kind of, I stole this from my partner actually. She's a writer, and she was working on a piece of work, and she goes, "Oh, what do you think of this?" I said, "Oh, that's really cool." And I thought it's kind of nice in terms of connect between, again, our experience through Te Hiri Mo Te Tangata, the mahi that we promote within Reconnecting Northland, and it's about seeds. Indigenous stories are seeds. They must be recorded and kept safely in order to preserve the knowledge held within Indigenous communities, later replanting these stories within the communities from where they emerged, so they may continue to live and grow in the context of each new generation. These can provide insights into the ways of understanding and responding to ecological and environmental crises through Indigenous ways of knowing and being. That photo there is of the Waipoa, and that's my uncle. We did a hikoi down now as part of Te Rai Titapu, and I just like that photo. So it looked good. My uncle's dead now, so we missed that colour. Hoino, mihi ana kia koutou. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou.